Mediate some shit between a pair of black bears, then deal with a woman with bowl cut bangs. We wanted to shout out Cheryl. Cheryl, we love you. So Cheryl has been a very dedicated viewer. She watches everything, she comments on everything. We've loved her for a long time. But this really, Cheryl, you've outdone yourself on this one, okay? So somebody commented on a YouTube short of me and said, the content was about not petting two dogs at the same time when you're having like inner household aggression issues and stuff. And he said, you can pet both dogs so long as you control the situation. Been around animals my whole life. I'd rather mediate some shit between a pair of black bears than deal with a woman with bowl cut bangs. Where are the black bears coming? What does that have to do with anything?
Maybe he...
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Mediate some shit between a pair of black bears than deal with a woman with bowl cut bangs. I'm that insufferable that he'd rather mediate some shit between black bears.
He was probably typing and he's like, what's the manliest animal? I would describe these like black bears.
You know that phenomenon that people have asked like men, their husbands, their boyfriend, whatever, like if they think they could win in a fight against a bear, and the fact that some of them have said yes.
Yeah.
You think you could win? That's where we're at? That's where their brains are at?
Yeah.
Anyways, Cheryl really came to my rescue. And she said, I'd rather put my money on the badass woman with infinite wisdom and bowl-cut bangs than on some emasculated incels still living in mommy's basement.
He's going to need his baba after that.
He is. Today, we're going to talk about, so me and Bridget have both recently started a scent work class with her beagle, my Dutch Shepherd. And we kind of wanted to touch on that, what that's been like so far, how the experience of like finally transitioning away from like always being in the instructor seat to like being a student again in a class setting, how we feel like maybe our obedience work with our dogs has inhibited some of the scent work, like sport aspect, and vice versa, and things like that. We thought it would be kind of a fun conversation. First of all, I'm like loving it.
Yeah.
I think it's so much fun.
Yeah, it is. It's like so great to see your dog like doing what they're bred to do.
Yeah.
Their sense of smell. Like I was recently watching a video that a dog's sense of smell is the equivalent of like humans looking at birds and like be like, oh, that bird is red, or that house is yellow. And dogs, like, not that they can see that, but the scent gives as much information of what like humans can see.
Yeah.
And it's like they're supposed to have 20 million times better scent than humans.
It's crazy.
And starting to see that applied in a dog like working through it is truly incredible.
And I feel like scent work is one of those sports where like pretty much any dog can do it.
Yeah.
And enjoy it and get good at
Katie.
it. Katie. There's a little Maltese in our class. So that we can talk about the variety of dogs. Yeah. Like there's a Maltese, there's a Cavalier King Charles.
That dog's really good.
Yeah, very good at it, which is interesting because they're a brachycephalic dog, which a lot of times that can inhibit the like smushy face dogs can inhibit their ability to like smell effectively, but I mean, that dog kills it.
Yeah.
There's a couple schnauzers, both a giant and a mini.
The giant was like...
on it.
Yeah.
She was on it.
Jazzy.
And then I have my Dutch Shepherd. Obviously, your beagle is like living her best life.
She is loving every moment. She's like, why didn't we do this sooner?
Yes. So Snoop, he's not taking the class, but I'm kind of transferring what I've been learning, and I couldn't help myself. I wanted Snoop to stay focused on his weight pull. So my Chihuahua does weight pull. And I was like, he cannot have a ton of hobbies right now. We need to, but of course I couldn't help myself. And he was very interested in when I was working with Lumos. So I did a short little session with him, and he's like over the moon about it and loves it. So I might take what I'm learning with Lou and in a more elongated way address it like with Snoop, because I think he would like it. Because Snoop's cousin, Ferg, has like a ton of titles in scent work.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, he's like a little professional sniffer over there. So she's been bugging me ever since I posted about Lumos. She's like, you need to do it with Snoop.
Yeah.
We need more Chihuahuas doing it.
Yeah.
I wonder if Pip would like it.
I know. I started with her a little bit. She's just not very motivated by her food right now.
Yeah.
She's a little fatty.
She is a little chunky.
She's a little chunky.
She's a little
girl.
chunky.
So we're working on building our food drive, and so as soon as we get her to a reasonable weight, we're gonna. Work
Has
on
she
it.
ever really been that food motivated though?
Yeah.
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 She is.
If I have to just be intentional about having her meal
Okay.
be fed in scent work and not give treats.
Yeah.
Because sometimes she's all about her kibble, and other times she's like, ew.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I would say that scent work, I don't know how you would teach it if your dog isn't food motivated.
Yeah.
I will say there is that piece. There probably is a way,
Yeah.
but I can't, and again, we know very little about it. Scent work is something that I've just now learning about. There's other sports that I adjacently kind of know stuff about, but personally, the only dog sports that I really have a decent amount of experience in, at least personally, is like weight pull, and then now a little bit of scent work. But adjacently, I'm somewhat familiar with like barn hunt, lure coursing, agility, protection sports, and stuff like that. You have a big background in like hunting, like duck dogs and bird dogs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, scent work, like in that particular, I grew up on scent work and having dogs like duck hunt and go through like finding the animal, because we'd do a drag with it like a dead bird, and it was so interesting to see the short hairs, and you would drag purposely to see like how well they smelled, and they would literally go in a zigzag if you zigzagged the bird.
Yeah.
Because their sense of smell was that good. They
That's
knew
so
exactly,
cool.
and that's what they were looking for, is that the dog is able to follow every aspect of their nose and find and retrieve the duck or the bird that was being hunted.
And that aspect, I mean, that's more, would you say that's more tracking
Yeah.
than like detection?
Yeah, it was definitely
Really?
more tracking, like, the purpose was, like, for, like, duck hunting.
Yeah, like you shoot the duck, it
Yes.
falls, and then they can go get it.
Yes.
Type of thing. Okay,
So-
that makes sense. Is there ever, because I know with like certain types of hunting, they'll use dogs that know how to like blood trail. Well, they'll like smell the blood if the animal's just injured.
Yeah.
If it's going somewhere to end up dying, and then they can lead them to it so that it's not wasted at that point.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen with like, bird dogs?
I don't specifically remember, like, any, like, blood,
Yeah.
but we would take feathers and,
Okay.
like, have them really pick up on the feathers, so it was kind of comical growing up, like, we would have a duck freezer of dead ducks, and we'd reuse the bodies of the ducks to get the dog's scent really well, so they knew the scent of a duck. So I'm not sure exactly, like, I don't remember specifically, like, smelling the animal's blood, because,
Yeah.
I mean, it was shot, so obviously it was
Yeah.
wounded, but,
Yeah. I assume ducks probably aren't that hardy
yeah.
to where they're like sauntering through the
Yeah.
lands bleeding out.
That experience, like, growing up and seeing that hunting world, and I titled one of my dogs in hunting sports, and that was so interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it was out in Colorado and Utah and Wyoming, and just to see the dogs have the lay of the land and like running and smelling and jumping in water was so satisfying. And I think that as a trainer, I was like, how can I replicate this
Yeah.
in Cleveland?
Yeah.
So, and giving dogs, like, I'm all about, like, I love scent work. I find it absolutely fascinating. So it's been really a nice experience to, like, start to get back into the same kind of theme.
Yeah. I decided to do it with Lumos because you had signed up for it, and then I found out, and I was like, oh, I want to do that with Lumos. Because my Dutch Shepherd is 10, and he He's had some issues with his kidneys, and obviously, like, just physically, his body is, like, not as capable. But if anyone owns dogs like that, you also know that, like, their brain will not recognize that. They're not inhibited by physical pain. They just go, go, go no matter what. And so they'll run themselves ragged and potentially injure themselves even more. So I really wanted to find something that was mentally stimulating but not physically taxing on him, because I could tell I'm having to limit what he can do physically, and I can tell that mentally that's like really wearing at him, and he's very bored and having a hard time. So I felt like scent work was like the perfect avenue. So I feel like if you have a dog who has physical limitations or even is older, it's such a perfect avenue to take them down, to be able to still give them like fulfillment and enjoyment and stuff like that. Because since I've started doing this, like, there's just like a calmness over him again. Because he's like, we do our sessions and we work, and then he can just kind of like and relax. And I don't see his brain like constantly like, I'm bored. And I think that's really, really cool for him.
Yeah. I think it's like it's a great mentally stimulating sport because your dog is using their natural behaviors.
Yeah.
And I always love watching dogs just be dogs. And Sunday, my beagle is doing it, and the ladies in the class are so nice. The ladies that are teaching it, and they have like decades of experience training dogs like this, and I'm finding it's a whole new world. Like, from obedience and what we train, and like solving behavioral issues to sport dogs and agility and the other classes they run. And it's just been like a lovely experience to, like you said, be a student again and listen to what these women have to offer. Because at no point in your life are you ever going to know it all about dog training. No. And if you think that you do, you need to do some inner work there.
Yes, yeah, and that's when you'll stop learning, and you'll inhibit your opportunities because nobody wants to engage with somebody who thinks that they know everything. Yeah. So despite us having a pretty extensive background in dog training and other avenues, like going into this class, I was like, I'm not telling anybody about the knowledge I do have about things, because I want them to treat me like I'm completely green, which I am, in that aspect, because I wanted to soak up as much information that they had and could give me. But I do think it is so cool to see the like diverse dogs, people in the class. I mean, you have older people, you've got younger people, you've got all those different types of dogs, because again, truly, scent work is so accessible to pretty much anyone, because again, it's low physical requirements, and every dog has a nose. Yeah. I mean, well, I would hope most of them do. Yeah. So you really have a lot more options, whereas like agility, your dog has to have a certain physicality to them. Bite sports and protection work, there's a myriad of breeds that would not be qualified or physically able to do that job or have the drive to do it. Even like barn work or like barn hunt or things like that, lure coursing, like you're going to have far more limitations with that. So I think scent work is really cool in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, I think there was a point in Sunday's life where honestly I felt pretty frustrated with her because I just had an expectation of who she was as a dog and what I wanted her to be, and we were like butting heads, and she was just a little nuts girl. And then recently I've like really taken a step back, and I'm starting to enjoy her far more by just allowing some of her natural behaviors to happen without anything egregious. I'm not letting her perform anything behaviorally that's outrageous, but starting to let her use her nose more and engage with it. Like, we did the little course at Scent Work. Yes. And she was like, this is incredible. And she'd like, they set up obstacle courses, and the dogs would have to like weave through it, and then you would have to recall your dog back to you. And she went in the course, and she was like, this is awesome! And I was like, Sunday, and you're not even supposed to say come to them. No, you're not. Apparently, because they want the dog to be more focused on the course than you.
Yeah.
And Sunday was like running amok, and I was like, Sunday, come. And the lady's like, don't say come. I was like, come. And she's just like, not listening to me because she was so focused. And initially I was a little frustrated. I used a little food to get her back into my space. And the lady's like, why'd you do that? And I was like, what do you mean? I'm giving her an obedience command. And then as we're going back into the course, Sunday's like looking at me, and she's no longer wanting to do the course because now she's realizing the food's coming from me rather than finding it.
Yep.
So it's like a moment I was like, oh, we don't really use obedience in this aspect because it inhibits the dog from having the confidence to do the course.
Yeah, to be independent. Yeah, because like with, they put such a big emphasis on that in the classes, is that this is a dog-led sport.
Yeah.
You are just simply there, and you will learn what your dog's signals are and what their alerts are, and it's your job to follow your dog's lead because you can't help them. You don't know where the smell is. You can't smell it. You have no idea. So, and it's, I mean, I think it's cool that in this sport too, like, it's pretty much impossible to cheat. I don't think there's any way you could cheat in this whatsoever. A very objective sport. But yeah, they put a very heavy emphasis on the independence of it, which is so drastically opposite of like obedience, of even a lot of other sports where the dog really has to have a high level of like attention and focus on you. So I know like with Lumos, I think the biggest hurdle for us, and it partially could just be his natural personality, is to be like very handler focused on me all the time. And so I've really had to try to encourage him that like, you do your thing and I'm just here. You don't have to look at me every 5 seconds of being like, am I doing it? Am I doing it? And the one time I did realize, and similarly to you, that I have to be very mindful of my cues with him, because the one time I didn't even have food, but I think I did something with my hand that made him think I had food, and then the whole time he wouldn't follow the course because he was like, you have something. Yeah. And he was just like staring at me and then offering obedience behaviors and like things like that to try to get it from me at that point.
It's like interesting, like the instructors in the class were like, you don't want to say come, you don't want to give any commands. You can say like sit at the starting line. Yeah. But once you release your dog, you want to have very little micromanaging. And she's like, instead of come, you say let's go. Yeah. And let's go means like we're gonna go off and find the next scent. So we recreated the scenario at home, and I was hiding the scents in the house. And I noticed the first couple times Sunday is like very apprehensive. She's like, what do you want me to do? Yeah. She's like, do you want me to down? Do you want me to sit? Yeah. And I'm like, let's go, let's go. And over the course of hiding it 5 or 6 times, her confidence got so much better that I wasn't inhibiting it with any obedience at all. I wasn't using anything. I was just being very encouraging. And the dog that was like glued to me at first is now going through my house and like opening suitcases and boxes and things like that. And it's so interesting to start to see her think for herself. Yeah. And then I hear her little sniffer, and she's like,
well, and of course, I overheard the one instructor when she was working with you. She goes, I mean, a beagle's nose is just superior. Yeah. And there's like, no denying that. Yeah. You're like, as if I had any control over that.
Yes. And it was something like her sniffing was something that bothered me for such a long time, because I was under the thinking like, if your dog is sniffing, they're not connected to you. Yes. And that used to bother me. And now I'm like, if she's in a heel position and we're walking, why the hell do I care that her nose is on the ground? If she's not.
And I'm fascinated in her case specifically to see, like, as you do more of this with her, if her obedience improves organically, because you're giving her an appropriate time and space to do the things that she so desperately wants to do. So then when you start setting boundaries on when you don't want her to do that, if she'll be more willing to be like, okay, because I know that eventually I'll be able to do it. Yeah. You know, you're giving her like constructive ways. At least I feel like that makes sense to me. Yeah. That would start to happen more.
And like even on when I bring her to work with me, we call her behavior skunking. I don't know.
Why do we do that?
I don't know. But skunking
She's
is
skunking
like
around.
searching for food, and her nose is to the ground on the training floor, and she's like trying to look up any morsel of food that she can have. And it used to bother me. I'm like, freaking stop! Like sit still and stop smelling. And in the class, her skunking was a beautiful thing, and the instructor was like, look how smart she is. And I'm like, do you think this dog is smart? And it's like getting to know a whole new version of my dog by allowing her to do what she was physically bred to do. Mm-hmm. And I went on a good old Wikipedia, and I read for an hour and a half about beagles.
They're so cool.
I was like, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know
Yeah.
about my own breed. So it's a shout out to owners out there, like learn your breed a little bit. Do some research. Mm-hmm. What does your breed like to do? What were they bred for? And can we find something in their life that they're really good at?
Yeah.
That they're kind of satisfying their very biological needs.
Yeah. Because I think for a while, there was a lot of rhetoric out there that, like, if your dog is doing, like, a natural, instinctual, somewhat breed-specific behavior in everyday life that was inappropriate, that you didn't like, that giving them context to allow that would just make it worse. Mm-hmm. Because then they're like, oh, cool, sometimes this is allowed. Why can't it be allowed all the time? But I don't think that that's true, and I don't think it's accurate. I think that if you give them areas where they can exercise that and enjoy it and have a good time and know that it's allowed, you're just going to satiate that part of their brain that they're just so desperately trying to fulfill, so that outside of that, you just have a much calmer, less like frantic, almost like high-strung type dog.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's like I'm training a beagle right now, and it's my first beagle that I've ever trained aside from Sunday. And the beagle's behaviors are like exactly what Sunday was like. And I know this dog like so well, and I've only had 3 sessions with her because this is untrained Sunday. And the behaviors that they're having was what Sunday was. So I'm very familiar with like getting to know these people and getting to know the dogs and learning them. But one thing the guy was asking me, he's like, we love to let her smell because she loves to smell. And he's like, can we have walks that are purely dedicated to smelling? And I was like, that's a very good question. Yeah. Because you have the sniffari. The new term is that you go and you just allow
decompression your dog, walks.
Yes. To smell. And during the obedience, like if we're focusing on obedience in that aspect, we want to teach the dog to focus and key in on us. But I told them like we can like leave the house, go a couple blocks, and then give that sniff break, rather than being too wishy-washy and like, all right, the purpose of this walk is you can go sniff whatever you want. But next walk, we're going to be really structured. Yeah. That's too confusing to a dog. But I definitely believe in adding sniff time to your walks and allowing the dog to like have that time to satiate those needs without it being the entire focus of the walk. So
yeah, it just has to be clear, like what the purpose is, you know, and having even separate commands put in place. Yeah. And I think that some of it too, like with stuff like that, my question would be like, are you also dealing with reactivity? Because I think that adds another level into it. Because like if you have a dog who the only thing they're struggling with is like leash manners, then I'd probably be like, sure, whatever. You know, you want to take them on a long line and let them like sniff and do their thing, like that's fine. Because you're not dealing with like behavioral issues beyond that. But like if you have a dog who also has reactivity, I think it is important to establish control first and then loosen the reins a little bit over time, like on that aspect of it.
I see a lot of like the force-free community or positive, purely positive, like they're like balance trainers suck because they don't allow their dogs any sniff time. And it's like, that's not the case at all. No. I'm just trying to add a little bit more control. Yes. And then we can bring back in the freedom in these behaviors, but you can't address like your dog trying to focus and work on reactivity while also letting them do whatever they want in the walk.
Yeah, I want to know that if I go on a sniff walk, if I need my dog to disengage from sniffing and come to me, that they will. So I'm going to take the time to teach that first, and then, you know, allow some of that freedom with the sniffing and stuff.
Very little of my walks now that Sunday is fully trained and off-leash trained have to do with her walking beside me.
Yeah.
That is a very, very small portion of our walks. Yes, it's still necessary at times if I'm recalling her away from a dog or a person, or we're walking in a busy street. But most of the walk, she can go and do whatever she wants to do and smell. But the second I call her back to me, I do expect that she comes and she's able to have that focus where she's not like, wait, I have to finish smelling this.
Yep.
And like, be able to come to me.
Yeah. Like Snoop, so leash walking is something that I've never taught him.
Yeah.
Like a walking position. Can he walk on a leash and be respectful of the leash and not be obnoxious? Yes. But like he doesn't have like a command, like a heel command. Like he doesn't know anything like that. Which I think is interesting because it's never become an issue. But the reason I didn't is because with him, we started doing weight pull when he was 5-6 months old, like very young, age appropriate stuff, and getting him conditioned and stuff. And in weight pull, you want them forward, like forward momentum, and you don't want to inhibit that. And I'm not saying you can't also focus on obedience at the same time, but there is something to be said for if you have a sport that requires a certain level of like tenacity, or a dog feeling very uninhibited and confident and stuff like that, that waiting on obedience can be really beneficial. Like I think it's interesting that you'll see even people raising like Malinois or Dutch Shepherds and stuff for the purpose of like protection work or things like that. And you could easily look at them out with their dogs and think that that dog is like 100% out of control. Yeah. Because it doesn't know any formal commands or anything like that, because it's 6, 7, 8 months old, whatever. And that's generally because they want their dog to be like a pushy asshole for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like they want to encourage the dog being very forward and intense and things like that, because it's easy when you know what you're doing in those aspects. It's easy to rein it in. Yeah. But if you rein it in too much, it can be far more difficult to build it back up again at that point. That type of mentality is something that I have seen myself transition and kind of meld over into my pet training a little bit too, with dogs that are very fearful and nervous. Yeah. Is like if I have a dog who is uncomfortable and with people or with me or in the facility or on walks or whatever, I'm going to be far less concerned with correcting what would maybe be considered like nuisance behaviors. Because if the dog is getting comfortable and they jump up on me, I'm going to let that go, because I want them to feel comfortable pushing a little bit and pushing the limits and the boundaries. So like if you're excited and we're doing recalls and you run over and you jump up on me, I'm probably not going to correct you for that right now. If it becomes egregious later on or, you know, whatever. So I think there's a lot to be taken from the sport world and implemented into pet training. Yeah. And I think that if as a pet dog trainer, you're not dabbling a little bit into that, or at least having like contacts or people you can speak to and help troubleshoot certain things using sport techniques, I think that you're doing a big disservice to yourself, and you're inhibiting a lot of your growth, because the way that, and again, not every pet dog owner is going to care nor have the skill set to be able to implement a lot of these more nuanced ways of doing things with dogs. But you as the trainer can, you know what I mean? And I think it's important for us to grow our skill set as much as we can at that point. And then use our best discretion with our owners. Okay, which owner do I think would benefit from this technique and find the most value in it? Or do we just want to do it this way with this owner, or vice versa at that point? Yeah,
it definitely depends on like the issues that they're having.
Yeah.
And how we can meet the owner where they are at and go from their goals. And like you said, with fearful dogs, the last thing on my mind is like heavy corrections and making sure the dog is perfectly obedient. My goal is more focused on how do we build this dog's confidence and start to have a dog that's more loose and not so rigid?
Yep.
And that the owners are recreating this at home. So the goal is to build a more confident dog going forward.
Yeah.
The goal, like I'm working with this just very sweet lady, and she's like, I don't care if the dog is perfect.
Yeah.
I don't care about bed stays. I don't care about down stays. I care that the dog is starting to be less nervous around the house. So we're doing things completely differently than I would do with like a reactive dog or a dog that has more behavioral issues. And it's just been a little bit interesting to start to dabble in doing things a little bit slower. Because you're right, the sport world is so focused on building the dog's confidence, and that's the first thing.
Yeah.
It's not about squashing and like obedience and you have to down and hold a bed stay.
Yes. It's not like centered around like compliance.
Yes.
Which like there is 100% a time and a place for compliance. Absolutely. But when you're taking your dog, and I will say that there are plenty of sport dogs I've met that when they're doing their sport, they're performing impeccably and they're the best at what they do. But in a regular home environment, they're 100% obnoxious and completely out of control. And I don't think that's reasonable. You know, I think, well, I suppose if that's how you want to live with your dog, then that's your own prerogative. I do think you can have both worlds, you know, at that point. But a lot of where we don't put a heavy emphasis on obedience and compliance in the beginning stages of building a dog for sport work, you compensate with just proper management.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that I let Snoop be completely out of control in certain aspects when I wasn't teaching him boundaries and stuff. It's that I was just really heavily managing his life and access to things to make sure that he wasn't able to rehearse behaviors I didn't want.
Yeah.
So like an example of that would be with a lot of dogs that you're raising to do like protection work and bite sports and stuff, you don't want to inhibit them biting things because you don't want hesitancy about biting. You want to build that and have that be very intense and strong and confident. So that's why you'll see a lot of people with Malinois laugh when their 7-month-old dog is like biting pant legs and, you know, just all this kind of stuff because they're like, it's easy to inhibit it later in other aspects, but right now I want the dog wanting to bite everything, you know? And again, they're going to be smart about the situations they put that dog in so that it's not rehearsing those behaviors in inappropriate ways that could turn into more problematic stuff later on.
Yeah.
You know, so you just compensate more with management when you're not using training at that point to start shaping the behaviors of the dog.
Yeah. It's like, damn, I lost what I was going to say. It's gone.
It's gone. It'll come back to you eventually.
Yeah.
But those are the benefits that I found of like taking some aspects of sport training and melding it into pet training. And again, like I said, I do think there's people that are really into their sports and they kind of let the dog fall to the wayside when it comes to having them adapt to normal everyday life and learning how to function well in a society as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that you can have a balance of both eventually.
Like a colleague that I worked with in the shelters a couple years ago, and she's with another training company right now, and she does a lot of sporting, and she's like, you should come down. She invited me out for, is it called Fast Cat?
Yeah.
So she's like,
Is that the one where they just run in a straight line?
yeah, I think after a lure.
Yes.
So she's like, you should come down and do that with me sometime. So I think I'm gonna try to take one of my dogs down and do something like that, because she's so into it, and she has like a ton of sport dogs, and she does a lot of disc stuff and agility, and I just want to learn more from her. Like I want to know more about it because what she posts is super interesting and fascinating. While she's also a dog trainer and she focuses on rehabilitation and behavioral issues. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to like have a conversation and see like, what do you do? Like, she's very much a sport dog mom. She spends a lot of her time and money on that. And to me, that's like so fascinating. Yeah, I think it's really cool. And I think that now that I'm finally like forcing myself to like make time
you know, to be able to do this stuff with my dogs. Like this upcoming year, my hope is that I'll be able to actually start doing some weight pull competitions with Snoop, and then he can pull 475 pounds now. He's getting there. He's getting there. Which is not nearly as much as he will be able to pull as we keep working on it. But, and then hopefully be able to do some trials with Lumos, with scent work, because I think that'll be fun. It's funny though, because I started with Lumos and I was like, this would just be a fun hobby. And then after one class, I was like, we're going to title, we're going to go through all the levels.
I know, I was like, we're doing scent work like 101, and I was like, where do I sign up for 102? Before I even started the class.
I just really enjoy the way they teach it too.
And I
think it's cool.
They're smelling birch right now. So we started with a scent of birch, which is just a cotton swab in a little metal tin.
Yeah.
And the way that we first started introducing it is having the dog smell it and then reward. Smell it and then reward. And then you can start to change your criteria where like the nose has to go directly on the tin.
Yeah.
So when they are smelling the birch or the scent or whatever you're going to be using detection-wise, that they're kind of associating that with food and reward.
Yeah.
And like some days, like little tail is going. She's so happy. But
I think it's cool to see Lumos start having to work more independent.
Yeah.
You know, because I think
so handler dependent.
Exactly. And it was funny because at the first class, the instructor even pointed that out. She was like, I have a feeling, she's like, he's so in tune with you. She's like, I have a feeling that you're really going to have to work on him being independent in doing the stuff. Not that he has a lack of confidence, because he's a very confident dog, but we have a very strong relationship and bond, and most of the stuff we've done up until this point has been very handler heavy as far as like the instruction and guidance and stuff. So it's cool to see him feel more comfortable like leaving me behind and like going and doing dog things.
I know.
I think it's awesome.
It's like just completely fascinating. Like I think eventually we'll get better at hiding the scent.
Yeah.
So right now the stages are very simple where the dog, it's kind of out in the open, but they're creating obstacles around it. Yeah. And the dog physically has to maneuver their body in a certain way to get to the food. And we're starting to like, I remember them mentioning that some dogs are very fearful of doing things like this. Yeah. So they were already coming up with an alternative for the dogs that were a little bit more nervous. Yeah. So we could still get them to be successful in scent work, but maybe they didn't have the confidence to go through like the broom or go around things because those are still so scary for them. So I thought that was interesting too, that immediately there was an alternative in the scent work class because they've had dogs that have had issues with getting their confidence, and I think it's a sport that very much will bring out a dog's like drive and confidence and their ability to be like, oh, this isn't scary. I can get food. Yeah. Even the cauldron thing, like we're using cauldrons as the dogs are smelling, and some dogs are terrified of the cauldrons.
Yeah, it is really funny. And I do think it's cool that, like you said, they're able to adapt it, you know? And it's not that they're saying, oh, the dog is scared, like they should never have to learn how to overcome that, but they're like, okay, the dog is fearful of that, so let's use an alternative right now, and here's some things you can do to like build the dog's confidence around it, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's again like the center focus of sporting is the confidence in the dog. Yeah. And whether some dogs are naturally just very, very good at that and they have no problem with performing those behaviors, or the dogs that are dealing with some anxiety issues, like there is an alternative, and they're able to offer that immediately, no hesitation, because they've had this happen before. And I think that's pretty beautiful. That can be an all-inclusive sport. Yeah. And it's not just for dogs that have a certain personality. Yep. It's like little Katie can do it.
Yeah. She's so cute.
I know.
It's really adorable. Cute. And I think too, like what I enjoy about, if you have a nervous dog, I think that's even more so a reason to look into a sport, because it really forces the dog, well, it presents them with pressure of various degrees or types. So like the pressure for a dog in scent work could be, like we talked about, whatever the scent is in is kind of scary, or whatever it might be, and they have to learn how to overcome that pressure and persevere through it and be successful.
Yeah.
And I think that in the same way that as a child we come in contact with like little problems, and then we have to figure out how to problem solve them and learn how to tie our shoes and learn how to make ourselves mac and cheese and learn how to do all these things, that every time you do something you feel more confident in yourself and more self-reliant, and that naturally builds your independence. And I think that there's so many dogs that probably could benefit from something like that. And I think that a lot of people might look at their dog and be like, oh, it's terrified. The last thing I could do is take it to some random class and where it doesn't know anybody or anything and expect it to like be beneficial or perform well. But I think if anything, those dogs could potentially benefit the most from it.
Yeah.
To have like a sense of like purpose.
And an
you know?
outlet. Like, we're not agility teachers at all, but we have a little bit of agility equipment, and sometimes with our nervous dogs, we'll get them to go up and down the agility equipment, and it's like so funny how that just skyrockets confidence. And the first time they're like, oh God, what is this?
Yeah.
And they're like, nails are gripping on it. They're like, and then by the
So
end, they're like,
yeah, just all over the place. And it's so funny too, like you said, how quickly that turns on a dog's like comfortability somewhere.
It's amazing.
It's wild to me. Like there's been dogs that have been so freaked out and nervous, and then I take them over the A-frame like a few times, and then the whole rest of the class they're running over to the A-frame and trying to just go over it on their own.
I'm not working on it. And they're like, yay!
I know, because they feel so good about themselves.
Yeah.
And the one day that was happening a lot, and I was like, okay, what can I, instead of being like, okay, annoyed that the dog kept doing that, I was like, okay, so clearly the A-frame is giving this dog some type of like excitement, fulfillment, you know, confidence boost, whatever. And I was like, how can I like take that and somehow mimic that in like our training to where they get that same sense of like, this is awesome the whole time, or even using the A-frame as the reward. You sit, okay, let's go over the A-frame, you do this, okay, you know, and finding stuff like that I think is kind of cool.
It's like stuff that you never really think of is going outside of the box, especially in balance training. Because some people can be so rigorous and get so caught up in what their expectations of the dog can be, and it's so focused on obedience that sometimes trainers forget to build the confidence too. And in that process, you may be suppressing behaviors as they come up, or really intense behaviors, but at some point, a good trainer, you're going to want to add back in that confidence, that connection with the person or the handler, or something that the dog enjoys. Because it's not all about like I'm your like militant with my dog. It's like, how can we have fun? Now that we've gotten past the shit and the really intense things, let's like see how we can connect again.
And I think too, like thinking about this in the context of puppies again, like if you're going to like a puppy class, and I'm saying like your dog is under like 5 months old, so like pretty young. Like 3 to 5 months is usually, I'd say 12 weeks is probably the earliest people start classes, just because of the usual vaccines and stuff like that. But if you're going to a puppy class and they're putting a really heavy emphasis on like sit and down and leash walking and all of these things, as in like practicing them as commands and stuff, I would probably find another puppy class. Because I just don't see, like, yes, can it be beneficial to do variations of those things and maybe learn leash pressure and stuff like that at a young age? Like, I suppose so, but to me, like, the best puppy class you could ask for or design or hope for is one that puts a really heavy emphasis on, there's a ton of stuff there that's weird, like lots of different surfaces, different elevations, things that make different noises, sights, and all that kind of stuff, so that we're getting a ton of exposure for your dog so that they can learn how to be really neutral to things like that and build their confidence. There's a heavy emphasis on handling, So they're teaching you how to get your dog conditioned to grooming or vet handling or looking at their teeth and their ears and their toes and all of that kind of stuff. And then there's also a heavy emphasis on discussing with you the do's and don'ts of socializing and how to make sure that it's very productive and things like that. Because again, kind of going back to like letting some things go and dealing with it later. I think a good dog trainer can look at your puppy and say like, these behaviors that you find annoying, just don't worry about it for right now. The dog, we will address that at some point, but the puppy is going to be a puppy and they're going to bite your shoelaces and they're going to jump on you a little bit and that's fine, whatever. And then also maybe conversely look at a behavior and be like, okay, so that is something that we do want to deal with and make sure that that's dealt with properly right away, yada, yada, yada. But if a trainer is coming in like real hot and heavy with obedience stuff and like really, really intense compliance at like a really young age with a puppy, I don't get it. You know, enjoy the puppy, enjoy the puppyhood, let them have a good time. Rest in the fact that like puppies bite, puppies jump, they bark at you. They pee on your floor. They do all these things. And yes, there's ways that we can manage it and we can make sure that it's not happening at inappropriate times and blah, 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 blah. But like also when it happens, just laugh and be like, oh, we got a fucking puppy.
Yeah, part of
This is what it
puppy is like the mistakes made along the way.
Yeah.
And having the puppy be connected enough to you that they're entrusting you and like you're managing it properly.
Yes.
Rather than going at it being like, all right, and by the time puppy's 6 months old, he has to know sit, down, come, bed.
Yes.
Like, you can start to shape those things, but holding it to a high standard, you're just going to end up getting more frustrated. The dog's going to get more frustrated.
Yeah.
And then we're squashing the confidence because we're so focused on something that doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Like with Ivy recently. She's a good example. She was like this big when she started training. She was like 12 weeks old. And her first session, we literally just did like a follow me around game. And we did like shaping on a bed with food. And then the rest of it was a heavy emphasis on here's what your whole day should look like. Here's how to use your crate. Here's how to practice handling drills. Like here's how to socialize her with people and dogs and blah, 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 blah. And then we ended up having quite a gap, I think due to just scheduling issues. But honestly, and her owner brought it up to me the other day. She's like, I really liked that after that first session, we didn't meet again for like 3 weeks because I felt like she got to mature a little bit. We had the information we needed for her age, appropriate stuff at that time to work on. And then we were able to still ease ourselves into the obedience and hit an age where she's 5 months old now. We have like 3 sessions left. And she was doing her commands off leash with Valo in the background running around and going over the agility equipment and all that kind of stuff. And so it just, I mean, it goes to show you that like you can take your time in the beginning with a puppy and focus on those super important aspects of like confidence, the excitement of learning, the excitement of being taught, engagement with you, and neutrality to your environment. And if you emphasize those things, everything else is so much easier.
Yeah.
It's so simple to teach commands.
Yeah.
But if you go right in with, I don't care if, you know, like not building excitement or engagement or neutrality or anything like that, and you're like, the dog just needs to know how to sit and down and come and leash and stuff, you're just going to create more conflict as the dog gets older because you're not starting with a really good solid foundation at that point.
Yeah. Like with my Theo, I'm training a Bernese mountain dog that's just like the sweetest little guy ever. And his owner comes to me and sometimes she's a little frustrated. And she's like, his behavior is this and that. And she's like, can we just work on getting him to just like sit in bed? Because she was so used to, she's a longtime client of ours. And she trained her dogs from a young age, and they were very well behaved. One of the dogs had behavior issues, so she wants to make sure she's setting Theo up for the best possible life she can give him. And a lot of the times where, you know, he's fussy, we did his nails recently, and she's like, I can't touch his nails. Like, he's just so fussy. And we were able to spend an hour working on that rather than kind of like shifting her mindset. Like, why does Theo need to sit for 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Like, why does he need to do these certain things? Let's focus on more practical things. So getting his nails done, going to a park, and having him not trying to engage with everything but his mom.
Yeah.
So we're not really emphasizing immediately like the general obedience that we normally do with some of our other dogs.
Which I think is, just hearing you say all of that, what was going through my head is that I think what's interesting now that I'm picking up on is, so say you take a dog who already has behavioral issues. It's an adult dog. We didn't do training from a young age. We didn't emphasize all those things I talked about. You've got a dog who has behavioral issues. We generally do start with obedience. And we say, okay, let's get a communication system set up so that we can communicate with the dog when they're doing something good, when they're doing something bad. And then we will use that communication and that skill set and implement it in a certain procedural way to start attacking some of these behavioral issues. But it's almost the opposite if you start with a puppy.
Yeah, it is.
It's like the complete opposite when you start with a puppy.
And I'm wondering that's confusing.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's partially why she's having a hard time with that, is because with her last dog, I assume obedience was a massive part in the behavioral change, whereas when you're starting with a blank slate that doesn't already have issues, you don't have to use obedience to create the dog that you're looking for. You have so many different other elements available to you to shape it in the right direction before it even has a chance to go wrong.
Yeah, and we do things completely differently, and that's why if you Google stuff, people are so lost because there's so much information out there that it really does benefit you to hire a trainer that is a professional trainer that can help you navigate these things and train the dog in front of them rather than going with the agenda that is so routine for them.
Yeah.
Like, my difference between, like, as you were talking, like, Theo is completely different than, like, the big controversy with Steve. You know? Steve, in one of our first sessions that got a lot of shit, like hate, is I was teaching Steve to sit because we needed something concrete to be able to give to his owner immediately.
Yes.
Because his behaviors were so intense and erratic that it would have been too unclear.
He was dangerous.
Yes, he was dangerous. And he literally, like, busted up both of his owner's ankles from this behavior.
Yeah.
And I handled that completely differently than I would handle something with Theo.
Yeah.
So right on the first session, we focused on getting Steve comfortable into those sits. In the first session with a puppy like Theo, I'm focused on, like, how engaged can this dog be with me?
Yeah.
Can we start talking about, like, crate training, handling, things like that?
Yeah.
And it's just a complete different world. So.
Totally different. And that's just another point to emphasize that, like, yes, we put stuff on social media and people are going to criticize it, and that's fine. We don't care. But it's so important to remember that when you see a clip on social media, and I even remind myself of this sometimes too, when I see something and I go, I probably wouldn't have done it that way, I have to remind myself that I don't know that dog.
Yeah, you don't know the context.
I don't know the context. I don't know the owners. I don't know their capabilities. I don't know the dog, the history. You know, if I watched a video of Steve and I saw someone handle it a specific way and I immediately go, oh my gosh, you need to do it this way. You're doing it so wrong. It's like, okay, well, he also, like, broke his owner's arm. Steve didn't do that. But you know what I mean? It's like, this isn't a dog that, like, you know anything about or the severity of the situation or what's going on, and you think that you can step in and give unsolicited advice on a situation that you'd have no context to at that point.
Literally called incompetent, like, a couple of times with the Steve controversy, and it doesn't really bother me because that person wasn't in our sessions, and that person doesn't know the severity of what Steve was dealing with, and his reactivity was dangerous and Steve was going to hurt somebody if he broke the line or his owners couldn't keep up with him.
Yeah.
That is not a behavior that we can just ignore and hope that it goes away.
No.
Or really focus
Take all this
on-
time to keep him under threshold.
Yeah.
Steve lives over threshold.
Yeah.
He lived over threshold. There was no keeping him under
No.
threshold.
The smallest thing, like on our first session, a person like we just saw the tail of a dog entering the door, and that was enough for him to go
Yeah.
fucking ballistic.
Yeah.
Paige left the room and came back in, and she had been there for a whole hour, and he fucking went ballistic. And
Yes.
that's not normal behavior.
No.
And that's not a normal case of how we would deal with a dog like that.
Yeah.
And Steve has made a massive turnaround, massive progress.
Mm-hmm.
So the people calling me incompetent, I don't think my clients would say that.
Well, and they haven't.
Yeah.
Because if you look on that, and that's when I pulled up for you the one day, your client commented on the post and was like, we're so thankful for Bridget. Steve has progressed so much, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is literally the only comment that matters.
Yeah.
Because the only person invested in that to the same degree is the owner.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're happy and they feel safe and their dog is progressing, which he is, mind you, he looks very confident
Yeah.
through his progression. He's a very happy guy now, and he's able to do so much more. That's the only person that fucking matters.
Yeah.
All the people that are like, the bowl cut bangs and the incompetence and blah, blah, it's just bullshit. Like,
yeah, like, fucking be nice on the internet. Like, it's not that hard. You
No.
don't need to spread negativity.
Go train your own dogs.
Yeah.
and come back. Report back to me.
Also, don't think that because you trained your own dogs that you have...
Well, everyone thinks...
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Knowing how to train a dog does not automatically translate to professional dog trainer who can take skills and apply it to a wide variety of dogs and know how to come up with an individual plan for each dog and owner and all of the above.
Yeah.
Okay? It's drastically different. We ended in a very different spot than we began this podcast.
Yep, that's okay.
But anywho, I hope you enjoyed our discussion. It went a lot of different directions, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I'd say the end takeaway is look at dog sports in your area if you're interested in
Yeah.
that. And maybe find something that would really benefit you and your dog and just try it out. Even if it doesn't, at first you don't succeed, try again.
If you're not sure like what your dog would enjoy or be good at, look up their breed and see what they were originally intended to do. And there's generally a sport geared towards that. So if you have a dog who was originally intended to hunt and do stuff like that, then find like the nose-oriented sports. If you have a dog who's very like athletic and high energy, then you could go towards like lure coursing or agility, or who loves swimming and stuff. There's a lot of water sports with dock diving. There's even, my mom does the sport with her lab that's like obstacle courses in the water. It's like water agility.
Like aerobics?
It's like, but they have like little like rings the dog has to swim. Like, it's so cool. So there's literally everything out there. So you can definitely find something that's works and excites your dog. And I think that you'll probably find it super beneficial.
Yeah. Enjoy the time with your dog, especially if it's a puppy.
Yes, don't rush it. Enjoy the puppyhood because it doesn't last forever.
Unfortunately, no.
No. Prioritize the important things and put a lot of emphasis on that. And then all the other stuff, just laugh about it and know that it's all going to work itself out. Especially if you're working with a trainer who's competent and knows what they're doing. Not Bridget, 'cause she's incompetent.
Yeah.
But if you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing, they'll be able to pinpoint for you, like, don't worry about that. Okay, let's worry about this and yada yada. So.
Yeah. Happy training out there and, reach out to us.
Again, thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Cheryl.
you.